Republic of Artsakh is a small country that is not yet recognized, but its history can be compared to the history of the United States. Why? Because like a small group in the United States fought for its independence, the people of Artsakh just did the same. They fought for their independence, they wanted to be able to determine their own destiny, and they declared the Republic of Artsakh. Unfortunately, because it was in the former Soviet Union, Soviet Azerbaijan didn't approve of it. And and they started a large-scale war in which Artsakh people managed to defend themselves, basically.
The world internationally recognizes it as Karabakh.
Nagorno-Karabakh is, the more known name for the place, but it's not a problem about land. That's how Azerbaijan tries to present it. It's a problem about people, about the right of the people who live on that land. Because of the fact that the country is not recognized, the population of Karabakh is deprived of their basic life, because Azerbaijan tries in every possible way to isolate Artsakh from the outside world. And I think it's unfair that any people, because human rights are universal, irrespective of the place you live in, you should be entitled to basic rights, especially to the right to life. And that's what Artsakhis were deprived of. And they didn't take it for granted like many in the world take the right to life for granted. Karabakhis have to fight for it on a daily basis to make sure that they can live on their ancestral land.
You know, you mentioned, Sal, do you need to say something? You can. Go ahead.
They didn't get a clean in.
Okay. That's okay.
You're going to use that.
It's okay. I'll fix it. It's fine. Okay, so, you know, in May of 2020, coming up next year, the 75th year of the victory of Nazism is something that will be acknowledged and commemorated and celebrated. Now, this is a region that you had the Soviet Union, the entire Soviet Union, the Caucasus, Armenia, everyone fought to preserve. So you essentially had two enemies at the time fighting the common enemy to have the victory of eliminating Nazism. Yeah. Is there anything planned, or is there any way to commemorate that occasion? Because it was something that changed the world and the history of what could have been.
In fact, we celebrate that day every year on May 9th. We celebrate the victory over Nazism. We call it the Second Patriotic War, the Great Patriotic War. But actually, this is a time when, yes, all the Soviet people fought, and many Armenians and, you know, all other republics fought against Nazism, because all of us recognize the fact that it is evil. And we had no idea at all that in modern world, in the 21st century, we would be subjected to the same attitude by a neighboring republic to which we were part during the Soviet Union, not by our own will, of course.
It's interesting because, you know, the veterans who fought, obviously, in World War II, not many of them are alive. But my great-uncle fought in this war. But my grandfather, who was younger, he didn't physically fight in the front lines, but he was around and he played his role in this as well. And now you call those men veterans as well, right? Because now there's not many of the true veterans left. So it is a very personal topic, because you're thinking about just how they played a role in changing history, and you know what could have been. But there's been so much bloodshed through history, and even continues, sadly, to this day. So the idea of a peaceful resolution is obviously of everyone's interest. You have the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, who says that something he's been criticized for and continues to be criticized for when he says he wants a solution where both sides are pleased and happy. What is the thought process in Artsakh, the people, when they hear that statement?
I think, you know, Artsakh people are peace-loving people. And as you said, many Artsakhis have fought in the Second World War. My grandfather was one of the participants of the Great War, and I remember hearing lots of stories about the war with the Nazis. And to have lived through that war again, He couldn't imagine that his grandchildren will go through the war and will see the war, will live through it, because we thought it was something that was in the past. It could not have happened to us. But because we have gone through it, we appreciate peace even more, because we are the most interested party to have peace, because the war was on our territory, actually. And that's why we understand fully that in order for peace to be viable and lasting, both sides, or three sides if you want, should agree to it. A solution should be found whereby all sides of it could be content with it. Mm-hmm. And of course, for this, on our part, we are doing everything possible, saying that we're ready to sit at the negotiation table and discuss all the matters related to the conflict or to the consequences of the conflict, while Azerbaijan, unfortunately, doesn't really show any signs forward. Instead, it chooses to ignore us, which is a sign that it's not interested in the conflict resolution. If it was, it would be probably more constructive.
Well, the statement that keeps getting repeated both from the United States, France, and Russia is prepare both sides,
for peace.
Both populations for peace. And you're saying that the Artsakhi's are taking that to heart, and they're just waiting for the counterpart to also take that into consideration.
I'll give you an example. For example, in Artsakh, even though we have been through war, and in 2016 there was an outbreak of 4-day war, as we call it, but Artsakh people, even the Ministry of Defense press side, never calls Azeris as enemies. They're called opponents. Even when they talk about the violations on the line of contact, they say the adversary has violated the ceasefire. The opponent has violated the ceasefire, because we don't want to create the stereotype of the enemy among our society, because we fully understand that there will be a day whereby we can change geography. We are side by side. And that's how we should live. We should coexist as neighbors, as two independent republics. That's how we see the future. While in Azerbaijan, they're nurturing hatred and anti-Armenian sentiments to the extent that an Azerbaijani officer who killed his Armenian counterpart officer in Budapest when they were on NATO training was heroified and glorified as a model for Azerbaijani youth to follow. So if you can imagine the differences, how both populations are prepared for peace, you will understand why today it's not really at this very moment only one part is making every effort to prepare its population for peace, because we fully realize that hatred is not a solution.
I want to talk about for a moment the environmental issues. It is a beautiful terrain, it's a beautiful landscape. What's being done to preserve the land?
As I said, because we got it the hard way. We had to fight for that land. We appreciate our land. And it's very green, mountainous, and ecologically pure, I would say. We try to do everything. We have a nature protection ministry. And actually, we are, even though we're not recognized, but we actually joined the Sustainable Development Goals. And this year, our first SDG report went out, in which we reported about the implementation of the goals, among which is, of course, the environmental protection. The work we do to make sure that we can protect our environment and pass it over to our next generations.
What about the idea that in order to respect someone, you have to respect them as a people? So it comes from respecting their music, their culture, their food, their arts, whatever you want to call it. Oftentimes there has been an issue with that as well. Speak to the importance of respecting those aspects of life.
Culture and cultural assets are being politicized, made a topic of discussion, because Azerbaijan tries to present the Karabakhi culture, like in UNESCO and places like that, as parts of its history. It tries to falsify all these things, while in Karabakh, because we know who we are, we don't have identity crisis or something else, we don't really do anything in that respect. We are ready to respect Azeri culture just the same way as we respect Spanish, Georgian.
Well, and there are so many parallels, right?
Of course, we're in the same region, and there are very many similarities as well. A lot of differences as well.
It's almost harder to try to find the differences.
Of course. And I think it will be really easier if Azerbaijan could also have the attitude of celebrating the differences rather than concentrating
on the differences. You wanted to make a parallel to the story of the American history, the American Revolution. Speak to that.
You see, Artsakh was part of, throughout history, it has a very complex history, because throughout history, as part of Greater Armenia, it was under Byzantine Empire, under Russian Empire, but it was never part of Azerbaijan, part of independent Azerbaijan. Neither of the first Azerbaijani Republic, which was the Musavatist Republic, or the newly independent Azerbaijani Republic that has declared itself as the hereditary of the first Musavatist Azerbaijani Republic, to which Karabakh was never a part. Karabakh was part of Soviet Azerbaijan, as part of Soviet Union, because Karabakh was one day presented to Azerbaijan without asking the opinion of the people living there. And of course, in the Soviet Union, there was no democracy or freedom of speech, and people could not really voice their concern. They did try, they were sent to Siberia or put to prisons. But when Gorbachev came into power and we had a chance, we saw a window of opportunity to voice our concerns, that is when Azerbaijan reacted very fiercely to the fact of our independence. But we did everything in line with the law of the then existing Soviet Union, because it allowed just the same way as Azerbaijanis exercised their right to self-determination and declared about Azerbaijani Republic, we, the Armenians of Artsakh, have exercised our right to self-determination and declared about the Republic of Artsakh, or then the Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh. And it was in line, in compliance with the then Soviet law, as well as all the international norms and principles. So in that case, if anyone wants to see Artsakh, if Azerbaijan has any dreams of seeing Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan, then it really has to get Soviet Union back, because that was the only period that Karabakh was part of Soviet Union and hence Soviet Azerbaijan.
Okay, I have two questions to ask you. The last questions. One, first of all, you are in a very important role, a challenging role as a deputy foreign minister for Artsakh. And you're a woman, and I want to highlight that because it's wonderful that you have this position. Talk about just your experience and the challenges you face, or maybe that you don't face any challenges.
Well, I don't think I face any challenges as such as a woman, because I have to say that in the Soviet Union, actually, there were women and men were equal. I mean, there was no difference in the salaries or anything, and most of those laws are actually continue to exist. When it comes to maternity leave, etc., the rights of the women are mostly protected. Of course, there are certain stereotypes in every society about the role of the woman, and there are some challenges there. But on the other hand, because most of the men at one period at my age, because the war started when I was a teenager, had to go to war and they didn't really have a chance to study, you can see many women in high-ranking positions in Artsakh, because it was the dictation of the time.
Yes.
Not because I ever dreamed of becoming a foreign minister. I would have rather be teaching at a university. But because there was no other option, actually, we did what we wanted to do. As to challenges, of course, we have certain challenges because we're not a recognized country, and hence, in our daily life, we face many challenges. As a non-recognized state, we don't have any diplomatic, formal relations with other countries. We have representation offices in some countries of the world, but they actually have limited capabilities as such. However, we try to create possibilities where we can do official diplomacy. We practice para-diplomacy. We try to, when the doors are closed, we try to open up windows and find new ways, do parliamentary diplomacy, which is a more free field, do sister city relationships, decentralized cooperation with different cities of the world. Artsakh has about 20 and more sister cities all over the world, from Brazil to California, France. I mean, in California we have 3 sister cities, Montebello, Los-Anджелесе is a sister city with Shushi, was one of our cities in Karabakh. So basically, we need to be more creative to reach the goals as a foreign ministry rather than a recognized state.
And the goal is?
And the goal is to get Artsakh recognized as a country so that its population, its people are not limited in their rights.
And the importance of having peace be involved in achieving this goal?
Absolutely. And we work, two of the priorities are, of course, the recognition and the peace process. But we cannot sit barehanded and wait until peace is achieved. On our part, we do everything. We announce about our readiness to be at the talks, to have our input into the peace talks, to contribute to it, because we should not forget that the ceasefire was signed between Artsakh, Azerbaijan, and Armenian defense forces, and a peace deal should be signed with those three sides, so that because any other deal that is not including Artsakh will not be viable, because that peace deal will need to be implemented, and Artsakh people should agree to that peace deal in order to implement it.